The crystal champagne flute shattered against the marble floor, and Vanessa Sterling didn't even flinch. She simply crossed her legs, adjusted her Chanel bracelet, and looked directly at the elderly black woman standing before her with trembling arms. "Pick it up," Vanessa said, her voice dripping with contempt. "And do try not to break anything else. Those glasses cost more than whatever Marcus sends you each month." Dorothy Washington's hands shook violently as she bent down, her 68-year-old knees screaming in protest. The heavy silver tray she'd been holding for the past hour tilted dangerously, and Vanessa laughed. Actually laughed. "My arms are so tired," Dorothy whispered, tears streaming down her weathered face. "Please, I just need to—" "You need to learn your place," Vanessa cut her off coldly. Before we continue with Dorothy's story, please subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Stay with us until the very end to see how this unfolds, and comment below what city you're watching from so we can see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. Dorothy Washington had been standing in the same spot for 1 hour and 17 minutes. She knew because she'd been watching the ornate grandfather clock in the corner of the Fifth Avenue penthouse, its golden hands mocking her with each passing second. Her son Marcus had bought that clock at an auction for $75,000. The number still made her dizzy. She'd raised him on $7 an hour. The silver tray in her hands held 12 Baccarat crystal champagne flutes, each filled precisely 3/4 full with Dom Perignon. Vanessa had been very specific about that. 3/4, not half, not full, exactly 3/4. Because that's what they did at the Kennedy compound, and Vanessa Sterling always did things the way the Kennedys did them. Dorothy's shoulders burned. The kind of burn that started deep in the socket and radiated down through her arms like fire through dry wood. Her fingers had gone numb 20 minutes ago, but she didn't dare adjust her grip. The last time she'd shifted the tray even slightly, Vanessa had made that sound, that clicking of her tongue against her teeth, sharp and dismissive, the way you'd scold a dog for begging at the table. "Dorothy, darling," Vanessa had said then, not looking up from her phone, "if you can't manage something so simple, perhaps you should sit down. Over there, where the help usually waits." The help. Dorothy had swallowed that word like a stone. Across the room, Vanessa reclined on the cream-colored Italian leather sofa that Marcus had imported from Milan. Her designer heels lay abandoned on the floor, red soles up like a taunt. Her phone glowed in her perfectly manicured hand. Those nails painted the exact shade of Russian red that some magazine had declared essential for fall. She laughed at something on the screen, her head thrown back, her long, dark hair cascading over the cushions. She hadn't looked at Dorothy in 43 minutes. The guests milled about, their conversations floating through the air like expensive perfume. Stock options, vacation homes in Aspen, the new chef at that impossible-to-book restaurant in Tribeca. They held their own champagne flutes with casual elegance, sipping and setting them down on marble coasters whenever they pleased. No one had taken a glass from Dorothy's tray in over 30 minutes. "Vanessa," Dorothy said softly. Her voice came out hoarse, barely audible over the smooth jazz playing through the hidden speakers. She cleared her throat and tried again. "Vanessa, dear." Nothing. Vanessa's thumb scrolled lazily across her screen. "Vanessa!" Dorothy said louder, hating the pleading edge that crept into her voice. "My arms are tired." Vanessa's scrolling paused. For a moment, Dorothy felt a flutter of hope, but Vanessa didn't look up. She simply sighed, the kind of exaggerated sigh that communicated profound inconvenience, and continued scrolling. Dorothy's hands trembled. The glasses clinked together softly, and the sound might as well have been a gunshot in the quiet room. Several guests glanced over. Dorothy felt her face flush hot with shame. "I don't want to drop anything," Dorothy continued, her voice barely above a whisper now. "May I please put the tray down, just for a moment?" Vanessa finally looked up. Her dark eyes traveled slowly from Dorothy's face down to the tray, then back up again. A small smile played at the corners of her mouth, the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. "Already?" Vanessa said, her voice light but laced with something sharp. "Dorothy, the party's barely started. The guests haven't even finished their first drinks." "I understand, but I just need to rest my arms for—" "You insisted on helping," Vanessa interrupted smoothly. She set her phone down on the cushion beside her and sat up slightly, as if preparing to deliver an important lesson. "When Marcus told you that we had staff for this sort of thing, you said you wanted to contribute. You said you wanted to be part of our world. Remember?" Dorothy did remember. She'd said those words 3 days ago, sitting in this same living room while Vanessa planned the engagement party. But what Vanessa was describing wasn't what Dorothy had meant at all. She'd meant helping with planning, maybe arranging flowers or addressing invitations. She'd meant being included, being part of her son's new life. "I did say that," Dorothy admitted quietly. "But I thought—" "The thing is," Vanessa continued, standing now and walking toward Dorothy with slow, deliberate steps, her bare feet silent on the marble floor. "If you're going to be part of this family, you need to understand how things work. This isn't Brooklyn anymore, Dorothy. This is a different world. A world with different expectations." Dorothy felt each word like a slap. Brooklyn. The way Vanessa said it, the borough where Dorothy had raised Marcus, became something dirty, something to be ashamed of. "I'm not from Brooklyn," one of the guests, a woman in a black cocktail dress, whispered to her companion. "Thank God." They laughed softly, and Dorothy wanted to disappear. "I'm just tired," Dorothy said, and she hated how weak she sounded, how defeated. "Please, Vanessa, I can't hold this much longer." Vanessa was standing directly in front of her now, close enough that Dorothy could smell her perfume, something French and expensive that Marcus had probably bought her, something that cost more than Dorothy's monthly rent used to be. "You're being dramatic," Vanessa said flatly. She reached out and tapped one of the champagne flutes with her fingernail, making it ring like a tiny bell. "Stand up straight. You're slouching, and it's making everyone uncomfortable." Dorothy tried to straighten her spine, but the movement sent a sharp pain shooting through her lower back. She'd been standing in the same position for so long that her muscles had locked up. A small sound escaped her throat, something between a gasp and a whimper. "Are you seriously going to make a scene right now?" Vanessa's voice dropped lower, meant only for Dorothy's ears, but somehow more cruel for its intimacy. "In front of all these people? In Marcus's home?" Marcus's home. Not our home. Not even the home. Marcus's home. As if Dorothy were just a visitor, an inconvenient guest who didn't know when to leave. Dorothy bit down hard on her lower lip, tasting blood. She would not cry. She would not give Vanessa that satisfaction. But her arms felt like they were being pulled from their sockets. "I raised him," Dorothy said suddenly, the words coming out before she could stop them. "I raised Marcus. I worked 3 jobs so he could go to private school. And he's very grateful, I'm sure," Vanessa cut her off, her voice still low, but razor sharp. "But that was then, Dorothy. This is now. And right now, you're standing in a room full of very important people, holding a tray, and complaining about it. How do you think that looks?" Dorothy's vision blurred with tears. One escaped and rolled down her cheek, and she couldn't even wipe it away because her hands were locked around the tray. Across the room, Patricia Vanderberg shifted in her seat. She was 72, old enough to recognize suffering when she saw it. Old enough to remember when society meant something more than designer labels and Instagram posts. She watched Dorothy's hands shake and felt something twist in her chest. "Richard," Patricia whispered to her husband, tugging his sleeve. "That woman needs help." Richard Vanderberg glanced over, his face tightening. "Stay out of it, Patricia." "But she's clearly—" "I said stay out of it." His voice was firm, brooking no argument. "That's Marcus Washington's mother, his fiancée. Their business. We're guests here." "We're witnesses," Patricia said quietly, but she didn't stand up. She wanted to. God, she wanted to. But Richard's hand was on her arm now, holding her in place, and she was too much a product of her own upbringing to make a scene. So she sat there, watching, her champagne turning sour in her mouth. Dorothy saw the exchange, saw the flicker of hope die in Mrs. Vanderburg's eyes as she settled back into her seat. Another potential savior, another person who chose comfort over courage. "I just want to put it down," Dorothy whispered to Vanessa. "Please." Vanessa stepped back, her expression hardening. "Fine," she said, loudly enough for everyone to hear. "If you can't handle something so simple, then maybe you shouldn't have insisted on being here in the first place." The room went silent. Even the jazz seemed to fade into the background. Every face turned toward them, some curious, some uncomfortable, all watching. Dorothy felt the weight of their stares like physical pressure. Her hand shook harder, and the champagne in the glasses began to slosh dangerously close to the rims. "Careful," Vanessa snapped. "Do you have any idea how expensive those glasses are? Each one costs $300. That's $3,600 you're holding, Dorothy. $3,600. The numbers hit Dorothy like punches. $3,600. She'd worked an entire year at the laundromat to make that much. An entire year of burning her hands on hot steam, of breathing in detergent fumes until her lungs ached, of standing on concrete floors until her feet swelled so badly she had to cut the sides out of her shoes. "I'm sorry," Dorothy whispered. "I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't replace baccarat crystal," Vanessa said coldly. She turned to address the room, playing to her audience now. "You all understand, don't you? Standards have to be maintained. If we let things slide, where does it end?" A few guests nodded uncertainly. Others looked away. Patricia Vanderburg felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back and took another sip of champagne she didn't want. Dorothy remembered something then, a conversation from last week that she'd tried to forget. She'd been in Marcus's study, waiting for him to finish a call, when Vanessa had walked in. She hadn't seen Dorothy sitting in the corner chair. Vanessa had been on her phone, laughing with someone. "No, she's still here," Vanessa had said, her voice light and casual. "I know, right? But don't worry, I'm working on it. By the wedding, she'll understand her place." Marcus is so busy with work, he barely notices what's happening at home anyway. It's perfect. Dorothy had sat frozen, not breathing, as Vanessa continued. She actually thinks she's going to live here permanently. Can you imagine? I've already been looking at some very nice assisted living facilities, the kind with activities and bingo nights. She'll love it. And Marcus will agree because he trusts me to handle family matters. The memory made Dorothy's hands shake harder. This wasn't thoughtlessness. This wasn't Vanessa being stressed about the party. This was calculated. This was deliberate. This was a woman showing Dorothy exactly what her future held. Another tear fell. Then another. Dorothy couldn't stop them now. One of the champagne flutes tilted slightly, and a small stream of golden liquid spilled over the rim and onto the tray. It pooled there for a moment before dripping onto the marble floor with a soft pat, pat, pat. Vanessa's eyes flashed. "You're dripping on the marble. Do you know what that does to the finish?" "I can't," Dorothy's voice broke. "I can't hold it anymore." "Then you should have said something earlier," Vanessa hissed. "Not now. Not in front of everyone. You're embarrassing yourself. You're embarrassing Marcus. You're embarrassing me." A young man near the window pulled out his phone. The movement was subtle, but Dorothy caught it. He angled the camera toward her, thumb hovering over the screen. "Recording? Taking photos? She couldn't tell. But the idea that her humiliation might be captured, shared, turned into entertainment made her stomach heave. "Put that away," Vanessa said sharply to the young man, noticing him too. "This is a private event, Jason. No phones." Jason slipped his phone back into his pocket, but not before Dorothy saw him smirk. The damage was done. Even if he hadn't recorded anything, the threat lingered. In this world Vanessa inhabited, everything was performance. Everything was currency. And Dorothy's suffering was just another story to tell at the next party. Dorothy's shoulders began to shake, not just from the weight of the tray, but from something deeper. From the weight of every sacrifice she'd made, every night she'd gone to bed hungry so Marcus could eat, every dream she'd deferred so he could achieve his. She'd given him everything, and now she stood in his penthouse, being treated like she was nothing. She thought about Marcus at 8 years old, coming home from school crying because the other kids had made fun of his worn-out shoes. She'd held him and promised him that one day he'd have better shoes, better everything. She'd worked a double shift that night and bought him new sneakers with money she'd been saving for her own medication. She thought about Marcus at 15, getting accepted to a prestigious private school on scholarship, but needing money for books and supplies. She'd taken on a third job, cleaning offices from midnight to 6 in the morning, just to make sure he had everything the other students had. She thought about Marcus at 22, graduating top of his class, turning to her in the audience and mouthing, "I love you, Mom," while tears streamed down his face. Where was that Marcus now? Where was the boy who'd promised her that when he made it big, she'd never have to work again, never have to worry, never have to bow to anyone? "Please," Dorothy said one more time, and the word came out as a sob. Vanessa turned away from her, walking back toward the sofa. "Honestly, Dorothy, you're being ridiculous. It's a tray. Just hold it." Just hold it. As if it were that simple. As if Dorothy's 68-year-old arms weren't screaming. As if her arthritic fingers weren't cramping so badly she could feel them curling inward like claws. Dorothy looked around the room desperately, searching for a friendly face, someone who might help her. But the guests had all turned away, suddenly fascinated by their own conversations, their own phones, their own champagne. No one met her eyes. She was invisible. Worse than invisible. She was an inconvenience they were all choosing to ignore. Dorothy's left hand slipped slightly on the tray's handle, and she had to grip harder to compensate. The movement sent a bolt of pain shooting up her arm so intense that black spots appeared in her vision. She swayed on her feet, and for a terrifying moment, she thought she might faint. "Steady," she whispered to herself. "Steady, Dorothy. Just a little longer. Marcus will be home soon. Marcus will fix this." But even as she thought it, doubt crept in. Would Marcus fix it? Marcus, who'd been so busy with his business deals that he'd barely been home in weeks. Marcus, who'd seemed so happy when Vanessa agreed to marry him, who'd barely noticed how Vanessa had slowly started excluding Dorothy from family dinners, from conversations, from decisions about the wedding. Dorothy remembered another conversation, just 2 weeks ago. She'd been trying to tell Marcus about a doctor's appointment she needed help getting to, and he'd been on his laptop, barely listening. "Mom, can this wait?" he'd said, not looking up. "I've got a major presentation tomorrow." "It's just that my arthritis has been getting worse, and the doctor wants to run some tests." "Vanessa can help you with that stuff," Marcus had said, still typing. "She's better at scheduling things anyway, right, babe?" Vanessa had smiled from across the room. "Of course, darling. Dorothy, we'll take care of it." But Vanessa never scheduled the appointment. And when Dorothy brought it up again, Vanessa had looked at her with that same cold smile and said, "Oh, I thought you were handling that yourself. You're perfectly capable of making your own appointments, aren't you?" Marcus had been in the room, but he'd been on another call, and he hadn't heard. Or he'd heard and hadn't registered it. Either way, Dorothy had ended up taking 2 buses to get to the doctor's office herself, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the pole on the bus. Another drop of champagne fell from the tray. Then another. The puddle on the floor was growing, spreading across the white marble like a stain. "For God's sake," Vanessa muttered from the sofa. "Someone get her a towel or something before she ruins the floor." But no one moved. The guests continued their conversations, their laughter, their casual indifference. Patricia Vanderberg stared into her champagne glass, willing herself to be anywhere else. Jason checked his watch. Someone near the bar asked the bartender for a refill. Dorothy's right knee began to buckle. She locked it, forcing it straight, but the effort made her whole leg tremble. The tray tilted dangerously to one side. "Don't you dare drop that!" Vanessa called out sharply. Dorothy jerked the tray back to level, and the champagne sloshed violently. Two glasses clinked together hard enough that Dorothy was certain one would shatter. Somehow, miraculously, they didn't, but the sound echoed through the room like a warning bell. "This is absurd," a man in a navy suit muttered to his wife. "Why doesn't someone just take the damn tray from her?" His wife shushed him. "Don't get involved, Thomas. You know how Vanessa is." Thomas fell silent, but his jaw tightened. He looked at Dorothy, then at Vanessa, then back at his champagne. He took a long drink and turned away. Dorothy thought about setting the tray down anyway, just putting it on the floor and walking out. But where would she go? This was Marcus's home. Her apartment in Brooklyn was gone, sublet when Marcus insisted she stay with him until the wedding. Until Vanessa became family, and Dorothy became, what? A burden? An embarrassment? "I raised him," Dorothy whispered to herself, the words a prayer now. "I raised him right. I raised him to be kind." But kindness seemed very far away in this cold, beautiful room. Vanessa's phone rang, a bright chirping sound that cut through the tension. She answered immediately, her voice transforming into something warm and gracious. "Marcus, darling! Yes, the party's going wonderfully. Everyone's here." "Mm-hmm. What? Oh, you're on your way? How soon?" Dorothy's heart leaped. Marcus was coming home. He'd see this. He'd see what Vanessa was doing. He'd make it stop. "Another hour?" Vanessa continued, and Dorothy's hope deflated like a punctured balloon. "Oh, that's fine. We'll manage. Yes, she's here. Your mother." "Mm-hmm. She's been very helpful." The way Vanessa said helpful made Dorothy's stomach turn. The word was wrapped in mockery, in condescension, in barely concealed contempt. "All right, darling. See you soon. Love you too." Vanessa ended the call and smiled at the room. "Marcus sends his regards. He'll be here in about an hour. Something about a conference call that ran late." An hour. Dorothy had to hold this tray for another hour. She couldn't. She physically could not. Her arms were giving out. Her hands were numb. Her back was screaming. Her knees were shaking. "Vanessa," Dorothy tried one more time, her voice breaking completely now. "Please, I'm begging you." "My arms are fine," Vanessa finished for her, standing up and walking over again. She leaned in close enough that only Dorothy could hear her next words. "You want to know the truth, Dorothy? This is a test, to see if you can handle being part of this family. And right now, you're failing. Badly." Dorothy's breath caught. "A test?" "Everything is a test," Vanessa whispered. "How you dress, how you speak, how you handle discomfort. Marcus needs a mother who elevates him, not one who embarrasses him. And standing here, crying, complaining about holding a simple tray, that's embarrassing." "I'm his mother," Dorothy said, her voice shaking. "I don't need to pass your tests." Vanessa's smile was sharp as a knife. "Oh, Dorothy, that's where you're wrong. You absolutely do. Because in about 6 months, I'll be his wife, which means I'll be the woman he listens to, the woman he trusts, The woman who decides what's best for our family. She paused, letting the words sink in. You're not competing with me, Dorothy. You already lost. You just don't know it yet. The cruelty of it, the calculated viciousness, hit Dorothy like a physical blow. This wasn't about the tray. This wasn't about the party. This was about power. About Vanessa establishing dominance, showing Dorothy exactly who would control Marcus's life going forward. The tears were flowing freely now, dropping onto the tray and mixing with the spilled champagne. Dorothy didn't even care anymore who saw. Let them see. Let them all see what Vanessa Sterling really was. But they didn't see. Or they saw and didn't care. Either way, Dorothy stood alone in a room full of people, invisible in her suffering. Vanessa straightened up, speaking loudly now for everyone to hear.
You know what, Dorothy? I think we need to have a serious conversation after the party about realistic expectations, about what you can and cannot handle, about what's appropriate for someone your age. Someone your age. The phrase hung in the air like a slap. Several guests shifted uncomfortably. Patricia Vanderberg closed her eyes, unable to watch any more. Dorothy's arms dropped an inch. Just an inch. But it was enough. The tray tilted sharply, and this time one of the champagne flutes slid across the silver surface and tumbled to the floor. The sound of shattering crystal seemed impossibly loud. The room froze. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. Every head turned. Dorothy stared at the broken glass on the floor, at the puddle of champagne spreading across the white marble, and felt something inside her shatter too. "I'm sorry," she gasped. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. My hands, I couldn't." Vanessa was on her feet instantly, her face twisted with fury. "You dropped it! After everything I said, you actually dropped it!" "My hands gave out," Dorothy sobbed. "I couldn't hold it. I tried. I swear I tried." "Tried?" Vanessa's voice rose. "You dropped a $300 crystal champagne flute because you couldn't do one simple thing I asked you to do?" "It was an accident," Dorothy pleaded. "Please, I'll pay for it. With what?" Vanessa laughed, sharp and cutting. "Your Social Security check? Please. Do you have any idea what you've done? That glass was part of a set. A complete set. You can't just replace one glass. You have to replace the entire set. All 12. That's $3,600, Dorothy. $3,600 because you couldn't hold a tray." The cruelty of it, the casual dismissal of Dorothy's entire life, of everything she'd worked for, was too much. Dorothy felt her knees start to give way. "I worked for everything I have," Dorothy said, and her voice came out stronger than she expected, fueled by something between rage and desperation. "I may not have money like you, but I worked. I worked hard. I gave my son everything. Everything I had, everything I was, I gave it to him." "And he's grateful," Vanessa shot back. "But gratitude doesn't make you qualified to serve at a society function. Look at you. You're crying all over the place. You've broken expensive crystal. You're making my guests uncomfortable. This is exactly why I've been telling Marcus that you need better boundaries." Better boundaries. There it was again. That phrase Dorothy had heard whispered in phone calls, mentioned in conversations Vanessa thought Dorothy couldn't hear. "Better boundaries," Dorothy repeated quietly. "You mean you want me gone?" Vanessa's eyes flashed, but she didn't deny it. "I mean, I want what's best for Marcus. And Dorothy, I hate to say this, but you're making that very difficult. You can't keep up with this lifestyle. You can't handle the expectations. And instead of accepting that gracefully, you're clinging to him, making him feel guilty, making everything harder than it needs to be." "He's my son," Dorothy said, her voice breaking. "And he's my fiancé," Vanessa countered. "And soon he'll be my husband, which means I need to protect our family,
our home, our life together. And Dorothy, I'm sorry, but you're not helping. You're hindering. The remaining 11 glasses on the tray began to shake as Dorothy's whole body trembled. She couldn't do this anymore. She couldn't stand here and take this. She couldn't. The front door opened. The sound of it, that heavy click of the lock disengaging, echoed through the penthouse like a bell. Every head turned toward the entrance. Conversations died mid-word. Even Vanessa went still. Marcus Washington stepped inside, his tall frame filling the doorway. His suit was slightly rumpled from a long day of meetings, his tie loosened, his briefcase in one hand. He looked tired, exhausted. The kind of tired that came from closing billion-dollar deals and managing hundreds of employees and carrying the weight of an empire on his shoulders. But then his eyes found his mother, and everything changed. Marcus saw Dorothy standing in the middle of his living room, tears streaming down her face, her entire body shaking, holding a tray of champagne glasses like she was being tortured. He saw the broken glass on the floor, the spilled champagne spreading across the marble. He saw the guests, all dressed in their expensive clothes, all watching with varying degrees of discomfort and fascination. And he saw Vanessa, standing close to his mother, with fury written across her face. Something in Marcus's expression went absolutely cold. It was a look Dorothy had never seen before. A look that made her think of the stories she'd read about him in business magazines, about how ruthless he could be, how he'd destroyed competitors who'd tried to cheat him, how people in boardrooms feared his anger more than anything. "Mom?" His voice came out low and dangerous, the calm before a storm. At the sound of her son's voice, Dorothy's last shred of strength gave out. The tray fell from her hands, and the remaining 11 glasses crashed to the floor in an explosion of crystal and champagne. The sound was deafening in the silent room. Dorothy collapsed to her knees, glass crunching beneath her, her hands flying up to cover her face, her whole body convulsing with sobs. "I'm sorry," she cried. "Marcus, baby, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. Please don't be angry with me. Please." I tried to hold it. I tried so hard. But my hands gave out, and I couldn't. "I'm so sorry about the glasses. I'll pay for them. I promise. But Marcus wasn't looking at the broken glass. He wasn't looking at the champagne soaking into the carpet. He was looking at his mother, kneeling on the floor like she was begging for forgiveness. And the coldness in his expression deepened into something that made several guests take an involuntary step back. He dropped his briefcase. It hit the floor with a thud that made people jump. He crossed the room in 4 long strides, glass crunching under his Italian shoes, and dropped to his knees beside his mother. "Mom," he said, his voice gentle now, but still carrying that dangerous edge. "Mom, look at me." Dorothy couldn't. She kept her face covered, kept sobbing, kept apologizing. "Look at me," Marcus repeated, and this time he carefully took her hands and pulled them away from her face. What he saw made his jaw clench so tight, Dorothy could hear his teeth grind. Her hands were swollen and red, the knuckles white from gripping the tray so hard for so long. Her wrists had deep marks where the tray's handles had bitten into her skin. Her fingers trembled uncontrollably, and when Marcus touched them gently, she flinched in pain. "Who did this to you?" Marcus asked quietly. The quiet was worse than shouting. Dorothy had raised Marcus. She knew his quiet voice. It was the voice he used when he was truly, deeply angry. The voice that came before storms. "It was an accident," Dorothy gasped through her tears. "The glasses. I'll pay for them. I'll work it off somehow. I don't care about the glasses." Marcus's hands were gentle as he examined her wrists, turning them over carefully, his face growing darker with each red mark he found. "Who did this to you? Who made you stand here holding a tray until your hands looked like this?" Dorothy's eyes darted to Vanessa, then back to Marcus. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. How could she tell him? How could she explain what the past hour had been like without sounding weak, without sounding like she was trying to come between him and the woman he loved? Marcus followed her gaze. He looked at Vanessa, who stood frozen near the sofa, her face pale. He looked at the guests, all suddenly very interested in their shoes. He looked at Patricia Vanderberg, who had tears running down her face. "Someone better start talking," Marcus said, his voice still quiet but carrying across the room like thunder. "Right now." Marcus's question hung in the air like a blade. "Someone better start talking. Right now." The silence that followed was suffocating. Dorothy could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears, could feel the shards of crystal digging into her knees through her dress. She wanted to speak, wanted to tell Marcus everything, but her throat had closed up completely. The words were trapped somewhere between her heart and her mouth, choking her. Vanessa recovered first. She always did. That was her gift, Dorothy realized. The ability to reshape reality with nothing but confidence and a smile. "Marcus, thank God you're here," Vanessa said, her voice shifting into something soft and concerned. She moved toward him quickly, her hand reaching for his arm. "Your mother had a little accident. I've been trying to help her, but she's so upset she won't listen to me." Marcus didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on his mother, kneeling in broken glass, her hands still trembling violently. "Get up, Mom," he said quietly. "Carefully. Don't cut yourself." He reached down to help her, but Dorothy flinched away from him. The movement was instinctive, born from an hour of being told she was wrong, she was failing, she was embarrassing everyone. Marcus froze, his hands still extended, and something flickered across his face that Dorothy had never seen before. Hurt. Deep, genuine hurt. "Mom," he said again, softer this time. "It's me. Let me help you." Dorothy looked up at him through her tears, and the concern in his eyes broke something loose inside her chest. She reached for his hand, and he pulled her up gently, his other hand steadying her elbow. Glass fell from her dress, tinkling against the marble floor. "Are you hurt?" Marcus asked, already examining her for cuts. "Did the glass get you?" "No," Dorothy managed. "I don't think so. I'm okay." "You're not okay," Marcus said flatly. He turned her hands over in his, and his jaw clenched tighter as he took in the swollen knuckles, the red welts across her wrists, the way her fingers wouldn't stop shaking. "What happened to your hands?" "Marcus, she was holding a tray," Vanessa interjected smoothly. "For the party. She insisted on helping serve the guests, and I think she just held it too long. I told her to put it down, but you know how stubborn she can be." Dorothy's head snapped up. The lie was so smooth, so casual, delivered with such practiced ease that for a moment Dorothy wondered if she'd imagined the past hour. Had Vanessa really said those cruel things? Had she really refused to let Dorothy put the tray down? Or had Dorothy misunderstood everything? But then she saw it. The tiny smirk playing at the corner of Vanessa's mouth. The challenge in her eyes as she looked at Dorothy. "Go ahead," that look said. "Tell him. Let's see who he believes." "Is that true, Mom?" Marcus asked. And there was something careful in his voice now, something that made Dorothy's stomach drop. "Did you insist on serving?" Dorothy opened her mouth, but the words wouldn't come. How could she explain what had really happened without sounding petty, without sounding jealous of Vanessa, without sounding like she was trying to sabotage her son's happiness? Vanessa was so polished, so perfect. Who would believe that she deliberately humiliated an old woman? "I wanted to help," Dorothy said finally, and even to her own ears it sounded weak. "I thought I could contribute." "See?" Vanessa said gently, moving closer to Marcus. "She wanted to help. And it's sweet, really. But Marcus, I think we need to be realistic about what your mother can and can't handle. She's not as young as she used to be.
The phrase landed like a slap. Not as young as she used to be. As if Dorothy were a piece of furniture that had outlived its usefulness. Marcus looked between them, and Dorothy could see him trying to piece together what had happened. His eyes scanned the room, taking in the guests who wouldn't meet his gaze, the broken crystal scattered across the floor, the puddles of champagne still spreading across the marble. "Why didn't anyone help her?" Marcus asked the room at large. "If my mother was struggling, why didn't one of you take the tray from her?" More silence. Patricia Vanderburg looked like she wanted to speak, but couldn't quite manage it. Thomas, in the navy suit, stared at his shoes. Jason had disappeared entirely. Probably slipped out when the drama started. "We thought she had it under control," someone finally offered weakly. "She didn't ask for help." "Didn't ask for help," Marcus repeated slowly. He turned to Vanessa. "How long was she holding that tray?" "I'm not sure," Vanessa said with a small shrug. "Maybe 20 minutes? Half an hour? Time flies at parties." "Over an hour," Patricia Vanderburg said suddenly. Her voice was shaky but determined. "She was holding it for over an hour. I watched her. I wanted to help, but—" She glanced at Vanessa, then away. "But I didn't." The admission hung in the air. Marcus's expression shifted, hardened. "Over an hour," he said quietly. "She held a tray for over an hour, and nobody helped her." "Marcus, you're making this into something it's not," Vanessa said, and there was an edge creeping into her voice now, a hint of frustration breaking through her careful composure. "Your mother wanted to be useful. She wanted to contribute. I was giving her an opportunity to do that. By making her stand for an hour holding 12 glasses of champagne?" Marcus's voice was getting colder, more clipped. "That's your idea of an opportunity?" "I didn't make her do anything," Vanessa shot back. "She volunteered. And honestly, Marcus, this is exactly what I've been trying to talk to you about. Your mother doesn't understand boundaries. She pushes herself into situations she can't handle, and then, when things go wrong, somehow it becomes everyone else's fault." Dorothy felt the words like physical blows. Boundaries. Can't handle. Everyone else's fault. These were phrases Vanessa had been planting in Marcus's head for months, Dorothy realized. Seeds of doubt about his mother, about her capability, about her place in his life. "That's not true," Dorothy said, her voice coming out stronger than she expected. "That's not what happened." Vanessa's eyes flashed. "Excuse me?" "I said that's not what happened," Dorothy repeated. Her hands were still shaking, but something was shifting inside her. Anger, maybe. Or just exhaustion with being made to feel small. "You asked me to hold the tray. You said it would only be for a few minutes. And when I tried to put it down, when I told you my arms hurt, you wouldn't let me." "That's ridiculous," Vanessa said, but her voice was sharp now, defensive. "Why would I do that?" "You tell me," Dorothy said. She looked at Marcus. "Baby, she wouldn't let me put it down. I begged her. My arms were giving out, and I begged her, and she said I was being dramatic. She said I needed to learn my place." "I never said that," Vanessa snapped. "Marcus, she's confused. She's elderly, she's upset, she's twisting everything around." "I'm not confused," Dorothy said, and tears were streaming down her face again. But she didn't care anymore. "I know what you said to me. I know what you did." Marcus held up a hand. "Both of you, stop." He took a deep breath, and when he spoke again, his voice was measured but tight. "Mom, I need you to tell me exactly what happened, from the beginning, and I need the truth." Dorothy looked at her son, at the man she'd raised, and she saw something in his eyes that gave her courage. He was listening, really listening, not dismissing her, not assuming she was being dramatic or difficult, just listening. "She gave me the tray before the guests arrived,"
Dorothy began. She said I should hold it so the champagne would be ready when people wanted it. She said it would only be for a few minutes, just until everyone got settled. That's what I said, Vanessa interrupted. And then you insisted on continuing to hold it even when I told you to put it down. You never told me to put it down, Dorothy said, her voice rising. You told me to keep holding it. Every time I asked if I could rest, you said no. You said the guests hadn't finished their drinks yet. You said I was being dramatic. This is insane, Vanessa said, looking at Marcus with wide eyes. I would never. Marcus, you know me. Do you really think I would do something like that? And there it was, the moment Dorothy had been dreading. The choice Marcus would have to make between his mother and his fiancée. Between the woman who'd raised him and the woman he planned to marry. Marcus looked at Vanessa for a long moment. Then he looked at his mother. Then he looked at Patricia Vanderberg, who was crying silently into her champagne glass. Mrs. Vanderberg, Marcus said, you said you watched my mother for over an hour. Did she ask to put the tray down? Patricia's hands trembled. Her husband Richard put a warning hand on her arm, but she shook it off. Yes, she said quietly. She asked several times. I heard her. And what did Vanessa say? Marcus pressed. Patricia closed her eyes. She told her to keep holding it. She said, her voice broke. She said your mother needed to learn how things work in this world. That if she couldn't handle simple tasks, maybe she shouldn't be here. The room went dead silent. Even the jazz had stopped playing at some point, leaving nothing but the sound of people breathing, waiting. Vanessa's face had gone pale. That's not... Patricia, you're taking things out of context. I was trying to help Dorothy understand social expectations. She's not used to... Stop, Marcus said, and his voice cut through Vanessa's excuses like a knife. Just stop. He turned to face Vanessa fully, and Dorothy saw something in her son's expression that she'd never seen before. A coldness. A finality. You humiliated my mother, Marcus said quietly. In my home. At a party you insisted on throwing. You made her stand for over an hour holding a tray like she was hired help, and when she begged you to let her rest, you refused. Marcus, that's not fair, Vanessa said, and there was panic edging into her voice now. You're hearing one side of the story. You're letting your mother manipulate you. Manipulate me? Marcus's laugh was harsh and humorless. My mother has never manipulated me a day in her life. She's never asked me for anything except the chance to be part of my life. And you... He stopped, visibly trying to control himself. You've been pushing her out since the day we got engaged. That's not true, isn't it? Marcus's voice was getting louder now. The family dinner she suddenly wasn't invited to? The wedding planning sessions that were scheduled when she had doctor's appointments? The way you keep talking about her needing better boundaries, needing to understand her place. I was trying to help her adjust, Vanessa insisted. She's from a different world, Marcus. She doesn't understand how things work in our circle. I was trying to ease the transition. By humiliating her? Marcus shot back. By making her feel worthless? By treating her like she's an inconvenience instead of the woman who gave up everything so I could be here. Vanessa's composure was cracking completely now. You don't understand. You're never here. You're always at work, always traveling, always in meetings. Someone has to manage the household. Someone has to set standards. Someone has to make sure things run smoothly. And your mother... She stopped herself, but Marcus wasn't letting it go. My mother what? He demanded. Say it. Whatever you were about to say it to my face. Vanessa's eyes flashed with something ugly. She doesn't fit, Marcus. She tries. God knows she tries. But she doesn't fit in this world. The way she talks, the way she dresses, the stories she tells about Brooklyn and working in laundromats. It's embarrassing. My friends don't know what to do with. Neither do your business associates."
The words landed like bombs in the silent room. Several guests gasped. Patricia Vanderburg let out a small sob, and Marcus went very, very still. "Embarrassing," he repeated softly. Dorothy felt her heart breaking, not because Vanessa's words were surprising. She'd known, on some level, that Vanessa felt this way. But hearing it said out loud, hearing her entire life reduced to something embarrassing, something to be hidden away, was more painful than she'd imagined. "Marcus, I didn't mean—" Vanessa started, but he cut her off. "Yes, you did," Marcus said. "You meant every word. And you know what? You're right about one thing. My mother does talk about Brooklyn. She does tell stories about working in laundromats. Do you want to know why?" He didn't wait for an answer. "Because that's where she raised me. In a tiny apartment in Brooklyn, where the heat didn't work half the time, and we could hear our neighbors through the walls. She worked in that laundromat, and in restaurants, and cleaning offices, and doing whatever she had to do to make sure I had food and clothes and a chance at a decent education." Marcus's voice was shaking now, with anger and something that sounded like grief. "She worked herself to exhaustion so I could go to private school. She went without medication so I could have tutoring. She wore the same coat for 10 years so I could have new shoes for job interviews. Everything I am, everything I have, exists because my mother sacrificed her entire life for me." "I know that," Vanessa said, and she sounded desperate now. "I respect that. But Marcus, that was then. This is now. We're building a life together, a future, and I need to know that you can prioritize us. Prioritize our family. Prioritize—" "If you're about to say I need to prioritize you over my mother," Marcus interrupted, his voice dangerously quiet, "I suggest you stop talking right now." Vanessa's mouth snapped shut. The fear in her eyes was real now. She was losing him, and she knew it. "Let me be very clear about something," Marcus continued. "My mother isn't an embarrassment. My mother is the reason I exist, the reason I'm successful, the reason I know the difference between earning respect and demanding it. And if my business associates or your friends can't see that, can't appreciate what she represents, then they're not people I want in my life." He took a step closer to Vanessa, and his voice dropped even lower. "You talk about standards and social expectations and fitting in. But you know what the highest standard is? The one my mother taught me? Kindness. Basic human kindness. And you failed that test tonight. Spectacularly." "Marcus, please," Vanessa said, and there were tears in her eyes now too. But they looked calculated somehow. Strategic. "Don't do this. Don't let one misunderstanding ruin everything we've built." "One misunderstanding?" Marcus's laugh was bitter. "Vanessa, this isn't one misunderstanding. This is who you are. This is who you've been all along. And I was too busy, too blind, too eager to believe I'd found someone who understood this life to see it." He pulled something from his pocket. The engagement ring box. Dorothy hadn't even noticed he was carrying it. "I was going to give this to you tonight," Marcus said, opening the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring. "An upgrade from the one you're wearing. 3 carats, flawless. Cost me $200,000. Vanessa's eyes went to the ring, hungry and desperate. "But you know what I realized just now?" Marcus continued. "My mother worked for 30 years and never made $200,000 total. She raised a son who could spend that on a ring without blinking. And you looked at her tonight and saw something embarrassing, something to be managed, something to be pushed aside." He snapped the box shut. "We're done, Vanessa. The engagement is over." The gasp that went through the room was audible. Vanessa stumbled backward, her hand going to her mouth. "No," she said. No, Marcus, you can't. We're getting married in 6 months. The venue is booked. The invitations are ordered. You can't just—
Watch me, Marcus said flatly. I want you out of this apartment. Tonight. Whatever you can't pack, I'll have sent to you.
This is insane,
Vanessa said, her voice rising to a near shriek.
You're throwing away our entire future because your mother told you some lies? Because she can't handle the fact that she's not the most important woman in your life anymore?
Get out, Marcus said, and there was no emotion in his voice at all now. Just cold, hard finality. Get out, before I have security remove you. Vanessa looked around the room wildly, as if searching for allies. But the guests were all staring at their feet, at their drinks, at anything but her. Patricia Vanderberg met her eyes once, and there was something like satisfaction in the older woman's expression. You'll regret this, Vanessa said, her voice shaking with rage now. You'll wake up tomorrow and realize you made the biggest mistake of your life, and I won't take you back. Do you hear me? When you come crawling back, I won't be there. I'm counting on it, Marcus said. Vanessa's face twisted with fury. She yanked the original engagement ring off her finger and threw it at Marcus. It bounced off his chest and clattered to the floor, rolling across the marble until it came to rest near Dorothy's feet. I hope she was worth it, Vanessa spat. Then she grabbed her purse and her shoes and stormed toward the door. She stopped in the doorway, turning back one last time. You're making a huge mistake, both of you. And when this all falls apart, when you realize what you've lost, don't come looking for me. The door slammed behind her with enough force to rattle the windows. The silence that followed was absolute. Dorothy stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Marcus had ended his engagement, thrown away his future, because of her. Marcus, she whispered, baby, what did you just do? He turned to her, and his expression softened slightly. What I should have done months ago. Dorothy's legs gave out. She didn't mean for it to happen, didn't plan it. But suddenly, the floor was rushing up to meet her, and Marcus was catching her, his arms solid and sure around her shoulders. Mom, I've got you, he said, guiding her to the nearest chair. Just breathe. You're okay. But she wasn't okay. Nothing was okay. Her son had just destroyed his future because of her. Because she'd been too weak to hold a tray. Too pathetic to stand up for herself. Too much of a burden to just disappear quietly like Vanessa had wanted. You shouldn't have done that, Dorothy gasped out. Marcus, you loved her. You were going to marry her. You can't just throw that away because of me. I didn't throw it away because of you, Marcus said, kneeling in front of her so they were eye level. I threw it away because of her, because of who she really is. But the wedding, the plans, everything you wanted. What I wanted, Marcus interrupted gently, was to build a life with someone who shared my values, someone kind, someone who understood where I came from. Clearly, Vanessa wasn't that person. Dorothy shook her head, tears streaming down her face again. She couldn't seem to stop crying tonight. You don't understand. She was right about some things. I don't fit in your world. I don't know how to act at these parties. I don't know what to say to your friends. Stop, Marcus said firmly. Just stop. You're talking like there's something wrong with you, and there isn't. There's nothing wrong with you, Mom. There never was. But I embarrass you, Dorothy whispered. The stories I tell, the way I talk about the old days. You don't embarrass me, Marcus said, and his voice cracked slightly. You could never embarrass me. Those stories you tell? About Brooklyn, about the laundromat, about working 3 jobs? Those are my favorite stories, because they remind me where I came from. They remind me what matters. He took her hands carefully, mindful of how swollen they still were. I built this life so you wouldn't have to struggle anymore. not so you could feel ashamed of the struggles that got us here. Dorothy wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him so badly. But the fear was still there, cold and heavy in her chest. What if you wake up tomorrow and regret this? What if you realize you made a mistake? I won't, Marcus said with absolute certainty. The only mistake I made was not seeing who Vanessa really was sooner. A throat cleared behind them. Patricia Vanderberg was standing there, her husband Richard beside her, looking uncomfortable and ashamed. I need to apologize, Patricia said, her voice trembling. To you, Dorothy. I sat there and watched you suffer, and I did nothing. I told myself it wasn't my business, that I shouldn't get involved. But that was cowardice, pure cowardice. You spoke up when it mattered, Dorothy said quietly. That took courage. It took too long, Patricia replied. She looked at Marcus. Your mother is a remarkable woman. I could see it the moment I met her. The way she lit up talking about you, about how proud she was. And I watched Vanessa try to dim that light all evening, and I said nothing. Richard shifted uncomfortably. Patricia, we should go. This is a family matter. No, Patricia said firmly, surprising everyone, including herself. I'm tired of looking away. I'm tired of pretending not to see cruelty just because it's dressed up in good manners and expensive clothes. She turned back to Dorothy. You raised an exceptional man. Don't ever let anyone make you feel ashamed of that. Dorothy felt fresh tears spring to her eyes, but these were different, warmer somehow. Thank you, she managed. Patricia squeezed her hand once, then left, with Richard trailing behind her, already complaining about how she'd made a scene. The other guests were filtering out too, most of them silent and awkward, a few whispering to each other as they went. Within minutes, the penthouse was empty, except for Marcus and Dorothy, and the wreckage of broken crystal scattered across the floor. Marcus stood up and went to the bar, returning with a glass of water for Dorothy. Drink this, he said. Then we need to get some ice on your hands. Dorothy took the glass, but her hands were shaking too badly to hold it properly. Marcus steadied it for her, helping her take small sips. The simple kindness of the gesture, after everything, nearly broke her again. I ruined your life, she said when she could speak. Your engagement party, your wedding, your future. You saved my life, Marcus corrected. You saved me from marrying someone who would have made us both miserable. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Marcus sat down in the chair next to her. Mom, can I tell you something? Something I haven't told anyone? Dorothy nodded, not trusting her voice. I've been having doubts about Vanessa for months, Marcus admitted. Little things at first. The way she talked about people in service jobs, the way she treated waiters and doormen, the way she'd smile at them, but then say something cruel the moment they were out of earshot. He ran a hand through his hair, looking exhausted. And then bigger things. The way she kept finding reasons why you couldn't come to family events. The way she'd schedule things during your doctor's appointments, and when I'd ask about it, she'd say you must have gotten confused about the time. Dorothy's breath caught. You knew? I suspected, Marcus said quietly. But I told myself I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid, that Vanessa was just stressed about wedding planning and would relax once we were married. He laughed bitterly. I was lying to myself, because admitting the truth meant admitting I'd made a mistake. And I've spent my whole life trying not to make mistakes. That's because of me, Dorothy said. Because we couldn't afford mistakes. Because every wrong decision meant we might not make rent or... It's not your fault, Marcus interrupted. You did what you had to do to survive. But yeah, it made me into someone who can't stand being wrong. Someone who'd rather ignore red flags than admit he chose badly. He looked at her directly, and his eyes were wet. But tonight,
Seeing you on your knees begging forgiveness for dropping glasses while Vanessa stood there looking satisfied? That wasn't a red flag. That was the truth, right in front of me. And I couldn't ignore it anymore. Dorothy set the water glass down carefully. What happens now? Now we clean up this mess, Marcus said, standing up. And I don't just mean the broken glass. He walked to the intercom by the door and pressed a button. James? Yeah, it's Marcus. I need you to send someone up to clean the living room. And tomorrow morning, I need you to have Vanessa's belongings packed and sent to her father's place on Park Avenue. Everything. I want it all gone by noon. There was a pause. Then James's professional voice came through the speaker. Of course, Mr. Washington. Right away. Marcus released the button and turned back to Dorothy. You're moving into the master suite tomorrow. Marcus, no, Dorothy protested. That's your room. I can't. The master suite has the bathroom with a good tub, Marcus said. The one with the jets that'll help with your arthritis. And it has the walk-in closet and the sitting area with the view of Central Park. It's the best room in the apartment, and it should be yours. Where will you sleep? The guest room is perfectly fine, Marcus said. Or maybe I'll start looking for a bigger place. One with 2 master suites. Would you like that? We could pick it out together. Dorothy couldn't speak, couldn't process what he was offering. After years of shrinking herself, of trying to take up less space, of feeling like she was always one wrong move away from being too much, here was her son, offering her the biggest room in his penthouse. I don't deserve this, she whispered. You deserve everything, Marcus said fiercely. Everything I have is yours. It always was. I just let someone make me forget that for a while. The building staff arrived then, 2 young men in uniform, who immediately began sweeping up the broken crystal. They worked quickly and efficiently, asking no questions, though Dorothy saw one of them glance at her swollen hands with concern. Marcus disappeared into the kitchen and returned with a bowl of ice wrapped in a clean towel. Give me your hands, he said, kneeling in front of Dorothy again. She extended her hands, and he began gently applying the ice to her swollen knuckles. The cold stung at first, but after a moment it started to feel better. Marcus worked carefully, his touch as gentle as it had been when he was a little boy, and she'd let him help put bandages on her work injuries. You used to do this for me, Marcus said quietly, as if reading her mind. Whenever I scraped my knees or hurt myself playing, you'd sit me down and clean the wound and put on a bandage, and you'd tell me stories to distract me from the pain. You hated staying still long enough for the bandage, Dorothy remembered. You always wanted to run right back out and play. Tell me a story now, Marcus said, like you used to. Dorothy's throat tightened. Baby, you're too old for... Please, Marcus said. I need to hear your voice saying something other than apologies. So Dorothy told him a story. Not a fairy tale this time, but a true one. About the day she found out she was pregnant with him. How terrified she'd been. How alone. How his father had left the moment he heard the news. How her own family had turned their backs on her. How she'd sat in that free clinic with a positive pregnancy test in her hand and no idea how she was going to survive. I was so scared, Dorothy said. I'd never been so scared in my life. And then the nurse, this older black woman with kind eyes, she sat down next to me and said, Baby, I can see you're struggling, but let me tell you something. That child you're carrying, they're going to be your strength. They're going to give you a reason to fight harder than you ever knew you could. Marcus's hands had stilled on hers. He was listening with complete attention. And she was right, Dorothy continued. The moment you were born, the moment they put you in my arms, everything changed. You weren't a burden. You were my purpose. Every sacrifice I made after that, I made it gladly. Because you were worth it. You were always worth it. Even when I was difficult? Marcus asked, and there was something childlike in his voice. Even when I was a moody teenager who thought he knew everything? Especially then, Dorothy said with a small smile, because even at your worst, you were still mine. You were still the little boy who used to fall asleep on my lap while I sewed, who used to help me fold laundry and tell me about his day, who used to write me notes saying I was the best mom in the world and hide them in my lunch bag so I'd find them at work. Marcus's eyes were streaming now. I forgot, he said thickly. I got so caught up in building this life, in being successful, in proving I'd made it, that I forgot what actually mattered. You didn't forget, Dorothy said gently. You just got lost for a little while. But you found your way back. Because you were there, Marcus said. Because even when I was ignoring you, even when I was letting Vanessa push you away, you were still there, still loving me, still believing in me. He set the ice down and took both her hands in his. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I should have seen what was happening. I should have protected you. I should have... Hush, Dorothy said, pulling one hand free to cup his cheek. You're here now. That's what matters. They sat like that for a long moment, mother and son, surrounded by the ruins of the evening, but somehow whole in a way they hadn't been in months. The cleaning crew finished their work and left quietly. The penthouse was silent now, except for the distant sounds of the city filtering through the windows. Traffic, sirens, the constant hum of New York at night. I'm tired, Dorothy admitted. So tired. Come on, Marcus said, standing and helping her to her feet. Let's get you to bed. Tomorrow we can figure everything else out. Tonight, you just need to rest. He walked her to the guest room where she'd been staying. But when they got to the door, Dorothy hesitated. Will you stay with me? Just for a little while? Like when you were small? Something in Marcus's expression softened completely. Yeah, Mom. I'll stay. He helped her change into her nightgown, turning his back to give her privacy, but staying close in case she needed help. Her hands were still too swollen to manage the buttons easily, and he had to help her with those too, his touch gentle and patient. Once she was settled in bed, Marcus pulled a chair over and sat beside her. Dorothy reached for his hand, and he took it, lacing their fingers together. Tell me about the business, Dorothy said. What deal were you working on today that kept you so late? Marcus started talking, his voice low and soothing, about acquisitions and mergers and things Dorothy only half understood. But she didn't need to understand. She just needed to hear his voice, to feel his hand in hers, to know that he was here, and he was hers, and nothing had really changed between them after all. She was drifting off when she heard Marcus say something that made her eyes open again. I'm going to call Aunt Gloria tomorrow, he said quietly, and Aunt Ruth, and Uncle James. I'm going to invite them all here for Sunday dinner. Your family, the people who actually matter. Is that okay? Dorothy's heart squeezed. Those were the relatives who'd stayed in touch over the years, who'd helped when they could, who'd celebrated Marcus's successes without expecting anything in return. But Vanessa had made it clear they weren't sophisticated enough, weren't polished enough, weren't the kind of people she wanted at her dinner parties. Vanessa won't like that, Dorothy said automatically, then caught herself. I mean, Vanessa's gone, Marcus reminded her gently. And good riddance. So yes or no? Sunday dinner with the family? Yes, Dorothy whispered. I'd like that very much. Good, Marcus said. I'll tell them to bring everyone. Kids, grandkids, whoever wants to come. We'll fill this place up with real people. People who know what matters. Dorothy felt herself smiling, really smiling, for the first time all evening. You're going to need a lot of food. Then we'll order a lot of food, Marcus said easily. Or better yet, you can cook. I'll buy whatever you need. I want this place to smell like your pot roast again. Like your sweet potato pie. Like home. This is home? Dorothy asked softly. It is now, Marcus said. "It should have been all along. I'm sorry it took me so long to make it feel that way." Dorothy's eyes were getting heavy again. The exhaustion was catching up with her, pulling her down into sleep. But there was one more thing she needed to say. "I'm proud of you," she murmured. "Not because of the money, or the success, or any of that. I'm proud of the man you are. The man who stood up for his mother tonight. The man who chose kindness over comfort. That's the man I raised. That's my son." Marcus's voice was thick when he answered. "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, baby," Dorothy said. "Always have, always will." She fell asleep with her hand in his, and for the first time in months, she didn't dream of being small or invisible or in the way. She dreamed of Sunday dinners and laughter and a house full of people who loved each other without conditions or expectations or social climbing. She dreamed of home. Marcus sat with her until her breathing evened out and he was certain she was deeply asleep. Then he carefully extracted his hand from hers and stood up, his knees stiff from sitting so long. He walked to the window and looked out at the glittering Manhattan skyline. All those lights, all those buildings, all that money and power and influence. He'd worked so hard to get here, to build an empire, to become someone who mattered in this city. But standing there in the dark, listening to his mother's soft breathing behind him, Marcus realized something. He'd been measuring success all wrong. The empire didn't matter. The penthouse didn't matter. The deals and the mergers and the money didn't matter. What mattered was sleeping in the guest room, her hands still swollen from being forced to hold a tray too long, her heart still bruised from months of being made to feel unwelcome in her own son's home. Marcus pulled out his phone and opened his email. He had messages from business partners, from clients, from people wanting his time and attention and money. He ignored all of them and opened a new message to his assistant. "Clear my calendar for the next 2 weeks," he typed. "Cancel everything. I'll be working from home. Family emergency." Then he opened another message, this one to his lawyer. "Need to make some changes to my will and power of attorney. Also need to set up a trust. Call me tomorrow morning. It's urgent." He sent both emails and then turned his phone off completely. Let them wait. Let them all wait. For the first time in years, maybe in his entire adult life, his business wasn't the priority. His mother was. Marcus walked back to the chair beside Dorothy's bed and sat down again. He'd stay here all night if he needed to, watching over her the way she'd watched over him for so many years. Outside, the city continued its endless motion. Inside, in the quiet of the guest room, Marcus Washington sat beside his sleeping mother and made himself a promise. Never again would he let anyone make her feel less than she was. Never again would he choose his own comfort over her dignity. Never again would he forget who'd sacrificed everything so he could have anything. The engagement ring Vanessa had thrown was still on the floor somewhere, probably swept up with the broken crystal and thrown away. $200,000. Gone. Marcus didn't care. Not even a little bit. Some things, he was learning, were priceless. And the woman sleeping peacefully in the bed beside him was one of them. Morning light was streaming through the windows when Dorothy opened her eyes. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was or what had happened. Then it all came rushing back. The party, the tray, Vanessa's cruelty, Marcus ending the engagement. She sat up too quickly, and her hands screamed in protest. They were still swollen, still aching, the skin tight and hot. She looked down at them and felt a wave of shame wash over her. These hands had cost Marcus his future. The chair beside her bed was empty, but there was a blanket draped over it that hadn't been there last night. Marcus must have stayed for a while before going to his own room. The thought made her throat tight.
Dorothy got up slowly, testing her balance. Her whole body ached like she'd been in a fight. In a way, she supposed she had been. She made her way to the bathroom, moving carefully, and caught sight of herself in the mirror. She looked old. That was the first thing she noticed. Not elderly, not mature, just old. Her eyes were swollen from crying. Her face was puffy, and there were lines around her mouth that seemed deeper than they'd been yesterday. When had she gotten so old? There was a knock on the door, gentle and hesitant. "Mom, you awake? Come in, baby," Dorothy called, her voice rough from sleep and tears. Marcus entered, carrying a tray, and Dorothy's stomach clenched at the sight of it until she realized it was loaded with breakfast. Toast, scrambled eggs, fresh fruit, orange juice, and coffee. "I made this myself," Marcus said, setting it down on the dresser. "Well, I made the toast and eggs. The fruit was already cut up in the fridge, and the coffee is from the machine, so I can't really take credit for that either." Despite everything, Dorothy felt herself smile. "You cooked for me?" "Don't sound so surprised," Marcus said, but he was smiling too. "I'm not completely helpless in the kitchen. You taught me the basics, remember?" "I remember teaching you how to make ramen without burning the pot," Dorothy said. "That's not quite the same as making breakfast." "Hey, these eggs are perfectly scrambled," Marcus protested.
No rubber, no weird watery stuff. Actual good eggs. Dorothy reached for a piece of toast, but her hands wouldn't cooperate. Her fingers were too stiff to grip it properly. She tried again, frustration building, and the toast slipped from her grasp. Marcus was there immediately, picking up the toast and handing it back to her. "Here, let me help." "I can do it," Dorothy said, trying again. But she couldn't. Her hands simply wouldn't work right. "Mom, it's okay," Marcus said gently. "Let me help you, please." The word please broke something in Dorothy. She nodded, tears already starting again, and Marcus sat down beside her. He buttered the toast and cut it into manageable pieces. He held the coffee cup to her lips so she could sip without spilling. He cut the eggs into small bites and handed them to her, one at a time. It should have been humiliating, being fed like a child by her own son. But somehow it wasn't. It was tender. It was love. "I called Dr. Patterson," Marcus said, as Dorothy chewed a bite of eggs. "She's coming by at 11 to check your hands. She said from what I described, it sounds like severe inflammation, possibly some tendon strain. She wants to make sure there's no permanent damage." "You didn't have to do that," Dorothy said. "I can go to the clinic on—" "Mom, Dr. Patterson is coming here," Marcus interrupted firmly. "You're not taking 2 buses to some clinic when I can have one of the best doctors in the city come to you." Dorothy wanted to argue, but she was too tired, too sore, too emotionally wrung out to fight about something that was actually helpful. "Okay," she said quietly. "Thank you." They ate in silence for a few minutes, Marcus continuing to help Dorothy with the food. The coffee was good, strong and hot, and Dorothy felt some of the fog in her head starting to clear. "I need to tell you something," Marcus said finally, setting down the coffee cup. "About Vanessa. About why I really ended things." Dorothy's stomach tightened. "Baby, you don't have to explain. I understand." "No, I don't think you do," Marcus said. He stood up and started pacing, a habit he'd had since childhood when he was working through something difficult. "You think I ended it because of what happened last night? Because she was cruel to you at the party, wasn't it?" "That was the final straw," Marcus admitted. "But Mom, there were so many other straws. So many things I ignored or explained away because I didn't want to admit I'd made a mistake." He stopped pacing and looked at her directly. 3 months ago, I overheard Vanessa on the phone with one of her friends. She was talking about you, about how she was going to convince me to move you into an assisted living facility after the wedding.
Dorothy's breath caught.
What? She had brochures, Marcus continued, his voice tight with anger. Hidden in her desk drawer. I found them when I was looking for stamps. Brochures for luxury senior living communities in Westchester. Far enough away that you couldn't just drop by. Expensive enough that I'd have to keep paying for it, which meant I'd be invested in the decision. Marcus, I don't understand. Why would she? Because you were in the way, Marcus said flatly. You were a reminder that I came from nothing. You were proof that all this wealth and success was new, was earned, not inherited. And Vanessa wanted to marry someone who fit seamlessly into her world. Someone whose mother wasn't a former laundromat worker who told stories about Brooklyn. Dorothy felt sick. You knew this for 3 months, and you didn't say anything? I confronted her about it, Marcus said. She cried. She said I was misunderstanding, that she was just researching options for when you got older and needed more care. She said she was trying to be helpful, to plan ahead, to make sure you'd be taken care of if something happened to me. He laughed bitterly. And I believed her. I wanted to believe her. Because the alternative was admitting that the woman I was planning to marry saw my mother as a problem to be solved, rather than a person to be loved. Oh, baby, Dorothy whispered. There was other stuff too, Marcus continued. Smaller things. She'd schedule our engagement photos during your church service times. She'd plan wedding dress shopping on days you had physical therapy. When I'd point it out, she'd apologize and say she'd forgotten, but it happened too often to be coincidence. He sat back down heavily. And the worst part? I let it happen. I was so focused on work, so caught up in being successful, that I let her slowly push you out of my life. I chose my own comfort over your well-being. You didn't know, Dorothy said. I did know, Marcus corrected. Deep down, I knew something was wrong. I just didn't want to deal with it. Didn't want the drama, didn't want to face another failure. And that makes me complicit in what she did to you. Dorothy reached out with her stiff, swollen hands and took his face between them, ignoring the pain. Listen to me. You are not responsible for her actions. You didn't make her cruel. And when you saw what she was really like, you acted. That's what matters. I should have acted sooner. Maybe, Dorothy said. But you acted when it counted. You chose me over her, over the wedding, over everything you thought you wanted. That takes courage, baby. Real courage. There was another knock at the door. Marcus wiped his eyes quickly and stood up. That's probably James with the moving crew. I told him to start packing Vanessa's things first thing this morning. But when Marcus opened the door, it wasn't James. It was Vanessa. She looked terrible. Her makeup was smeared, her hair was messy, and she was wearing the same clothes from last night. But there was something different in her eyes. Something desperate. Marcus, please, she said immediately. Please, just give me 5 minutes. 5 minutes to explain. There's nothing to explain, Marcus said, blocking the doorway. We're done, Vanessa. I told you that last night. You were angry last night, Vanessa said quickly. You were upset about your mother, and you weren't thinking clearly. But now that you've had time to calm down, we can talk about this rationally. I am thinking clearly, Marcus said. Probably more clearly than I have in months. And the answer is still no. We're done. Vanessa's eyes flicked past him to Dorothy, and her expression hardened for just a moment before smoothing back into pleading. This is because of her, isn't it? She's been poisoning you against me since day one. Don't, Marcus warned. Don't you dare try to make this about my mother. This is about you, about your choices, about who you really are. Who I really am? Vanessa's voice rose. I'm the woman who stood by you through every late night, every business crisis, every stressful merger. I'm the woman who planned the perfect engagement party, who introduced you to the right people, who helped you build your reputation in this city.
You helped build my reputation? Marcus laughed without humor. Vanessa, I built my own reputation. I closed my own deals. I made my own success. You just showed up for the credit. Vanessa flinched like he'd slapped her. That's not fair. I supported you. You used me, Marcus corrected.
You wanted to marry a millionaire, and I was convenient. Successful enough to give you the lifestyle you wanted. Knew enough to money that you thought you could mold me into whatever you needed me to be. That's not true, Vanessa said, but her voice was shaking now. I love you. I wouldn't have said yes if I didn't love you. You love what I represent, Marcus said. You love the penthouse and the status and telling your friends you're marrying Marcus Washington. But you don't love me. If you loved me, you'd love my mother too. You'd understand that she's part of who I am, part of where I came from. Vanessa's mask was slipping completely now. Your mother is holding you back. Can't you see that? With her around, constantly reminding everyone where you came from, you'll never be fully accepted. You'll always be the kid from Brooklyn who made good, instead of someone who belongs. I don't want to belong to your world, Marcus said quietly. Not if belonging means forgetting where I came from. Not if it means treating people like my mother as embarrassments instead of blessings. You're making a mistake, Vanessa said, and there was something ugly creeping into her voice now. You think you can just end this and move on? Everyone knows about us. The engagement announcement was in the Times. The wedding invitations are ordered. If you walk away now, people will talk. They'll wonder what's wrong with you. They'll question your judgment. Let them talk, Marcus said. Let them question. I don't care anymore. You'll care when investors start pulling out, Vanessa shot back. You'll care when business partners start avoiding you. You'll care when you realize that reputation matters in this city, and yours is about to take a massive hit. Marcus smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Is that a threat, Vanessa? It's reality, she said. My father has connections. My friends have influence. One word from me, and your social standing in this city becomes very complicated. Then say your word, Marcus challenged. Tell your father. Tell your friends. Tell anyone who'll listen. But you know what they'll ask you? They'll ask you why the engagement ended. And you can either tell them the truth, which makes you look like a monster, or you can lie, which I'll be happy to correct publicly. Vanessa's face went white. You wouldn't. Try me, Marcus said. Tell people I'm difficult. Tell them I'm unstable. Tell them whatever story makes you feel better. But the moment you start damaging my business, I'll tell everyone exactly what happened last night. And I've got witnesses, reputable witnesses like Patricia Vanderberg, who'll confirm every word. Patricia wouldn't, Vanessa said, but she didn't sound certain. Patricia called me this morning, Marcus said. She wanted to make sure Dorothy was okay. She also wanted to apologize for not speaking up sooner. And when I thanked her for eventually telling the truth, she said she'd be happy to do it again if necessary, in front of anyone who asks. Vanessa's hands were clenched into fists. This isn't over. Yes, it is, Marcus said firmly. James has been packing your things all morning. They'll be delivered to your father's apartment by 2 p.m. Your key to this place has already been deactivated. Your name is off all my accounts. We're done, Vanessa. Completely done. You're going to regret this, Vanessa hissed. Both of you. When you realize what you've thrown away, when you're sitting alone in this penthouse with nobody but your mother for company, you're going to wish you'd made a different choice. I already did make a different choice, Marcus said. I chose family. Real family. The kind that doesn't come with conditions or social climbing or manipulation. And I've never been more certain of a decision in my life. Vanessa looked past him one more time, directly at Dorothy. I hope you're happy, she said, her voice cold. I hope destroying your son's future was worth it. Dorothy stood up slowly, her hands still aching but her spine straight. She walked to the doorway and looked Vanessa in the eye. I didn't destroy anything, Dorothy said quietly. You did that all by yourself. And for the record,
I tried to like you. I tried to see what Marcus saw in you. But every time I looked at you, all I saw was someone who thought kindness was a weakness and cruelty was sophistication. So no, I'm not happy about what happened. I'm heartbroken that my son wasted a year of his life on someone who didn't deserve him. But I'm grateful he figured it out before it was too late. Vanessa's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words came out. Finally, she just turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor until the elevator doors closed behind her. Marcus shut the door and leaned against it, eyes closed. That went better than I expected.
Better?
Dorothy's voice came out higher than she intended.
She threatened your business. She said her father would ruin your reputation. Marcus, what if she actually does it?
Then I'll deal with it, Marcus said, opening his eyes. Mom, I've built this business from nothing. I've survived hostile takeovers, bad investments, economic crashes. I can survive Vanessa Sterling and her father's connections.
But what if—
No what ifs, Marcus interrupted gently. What's done is done. And honestly, I feel lighter than I have in months. Like I've been carrying around weight I didn't even realize was there. And someone finally cut it loose. Dorothy wanted to argue more, wanted to make sure he understood what he might be giving up. But the intercom buzzed before she could. Mr. Washington? James's voice came through. Dr. Patterson is here for Mrs. Washington. Send her up, Marcus said, then caught himself. Wait, Mrs. Washington? James, my mother's name is— I know, sir, James said, and there was warmth in his usually professional tone. I took the liberty of updating our records this morning.
I hope that was appropriate.
Marcus looked at Dorothy, a question in his eyes. She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. That was very appropriate, James, Marcus said. Thank you. Dr. Patterson arrived moments later, a brisk woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and efficient movements. She examined Dorothy's hands carefully, asking questions about pain levels and range of motion, pressing gently on the swollen joints. Severe inflammation, she confirmed. Likely some tendon strain in the wrists as well. Nothing permanent, thankfully. But you're going to need rest and ice for the next week at minimum. And I'm prescribing some anti-inflammatory medication. I can pick that up from the pharmacy this afternoon, Dorothy started, but Dr. Patterson shook her head. I'll have it sent over, she said, along with some compression gloves that should help with the swelling. You just rest, Mrs. Washington. Doctor's orders. After Dr. Patterson left, Marcus's phone started ringing. He glanced at it and frowned. It's my lawyer. I need to take this. He stepped out of the room, leaving Dorothy alone with her thoughts. She looked down at her bandaged hands, wrapped in soft compression bandages that Dr. Patterson had applied. They already felt slightly better, the gentle pressure easing some of the ache. There was a sound from the doorway, and Dorothy looked up to see one of the building's staff, a young woman named Maria, who'd always been kind to Dorothy. Mrs. Washington? Maria said hesitantly. I just wanted to say, I'm glad you're okay. Last night when I heard what happened, I felt terrible. I should have helped you. You weren't even at the party, Dorothy said, confused. No, but I was in the service hallway, Maria admitted. I could hear what was happening. I heard you asking to put the tray down. Heard Miss Sterling saying no. I wanted to come in and take it from you, but— She trailed off, looking ashamed. But you would have lost your job, Dorothy finished gently. I understand, sweetheart. You have to protect yourself. That's what James said when I told him this morning, Maria said. But it doesn't make me feel better. You deserve better than what happened to you. We all deserve better than what we get sometimes, Dorothy said. But we do the best we can with what we have. You're doing the best you can, and that's enough. Maria's eyes filled with tears. She reached out and gently squeezed Dorothy's shoulder. Mr. Washington is lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have him, Dorothy said. After Maria left, Dorothy sat alone in the quiet room and let herself really feel everything that had happened. The humiliation of last night. The pain in her hands. The fear that Marcus had thrown away his future. The relief that he'd chosen her. The worry about what came next. It was overwhelming. All of it. Too much to process, too much to hold. But underneath all the complicated feelings was something simple and warm and true. Her son loved her. He'd proven it in the most concrete way possible, choosing her over comfort, over social status, over a woman he'd planned to marry. That was worth more than any penthouse, any business deal, any amount of money. Marcus came back in, his expression troubled. That was my lawyer. She wanted to let me know that Vanessa's father called, threatening to sue me for breach of contract. Dorothy's heart sank. Can he do that? He can try, Marcus said with a shrug. But there was no contract, just an engagement, which either party can break at any time for any reason. He's bluffing, trying to scare me into taking Vanessa back, or at least paying her off. Maybe you should, Dorothy said quickly. Maybe if you give her some money, she'll go away quietly and leave your business alone. No, Marcus said firmly. I'm not paying her a dime. That would just teach her that cruelty and manipulation work, that she can treat people however she wants, as long as she finds the right pressure points. He sat down beside Dorothy. Besides, my lawyer already has a strategy. If Vanessa's father pushes this, we'll countersue for emotional distress and elder abuse. We've got witnesses. We've got your medical records showing the damage to your hands, and we've got Patricia Vanderberg willing to testify about what she saw. Elder abuse? Dorothy repeated faintly. That's what it was, Mom, Marcus said quietly. What Vanessa did to you last night meets the legal definition. Forcing an elderly person to perform physical labor beyond their capability, denying them rest when they requested it, causing physical harm through negligence or malice. Any lawyer would take that case in a heartbeat. Dorothy had never thought about it that way. She thought about being humiliated, being hurt, being diminished. But abused? That word seemed too big, too serious for what had happened. Except it wasn't, was it? Vanessa had deliberately caused her pain, had enjoyed her suffering, had used her position of power to make Dorothy feel helpless and small. That was abuse. I don't want to sue anyone, Dorothy said. I just want this to be over. It will be, Marcus promised. Vanessa's father is a lot of things, but he's not stupid. Once he realizes we're serious, once he understands that pushing this will only expose his daughter's behavior publicly, he'll back down. Men like him don't like scandals. They like the appearance of respectability more than they like actual justice. He was probably right. Dorothy hoped he was right. Now, Marcus said, deliberately changing the subject, what do you want for lunch? And don't say nothing. Dr. Patterson said you need to keep your strength up. Dorothy was about to answer when Marcus's phone rang again. He glanced at the screen, and his expression shifted from annoyed to surprised. It's Patricia Vanderberg. Mind if I take this? Of course not, Dorothy said, though her stomach tightened with worry. What if Patricia was calling to say she'd changed her mind about testifying? What if Vanessa had gotten to her somehow? Marcus answered on speaker. Mrs. Vanderberg, good morning. Marcus, dear, I hope I'm not interrupting. Patricia's voice came through, warm but urgent. I'm calling because I just had a very interesting conversation with Constance Whitmore. Do you know her? The philanthropist? Marcus asked. We've met at a few events. Well, she called me this morning asking about what happened at your party last night, Patricia said. Apparently, word is already spreading through certain circles. Vanessa's been calling people, trying to control the narrative. Dorothy's heart sank. So it was starting already. The social campaign against Marcus. What's she saying? Marcus asked, his voice carefully neutral. That you had a breakdown, Patricia said bluntly. That the stress of running your company has made you paranoid and unstable. That you're pushing away everyone who cares about you, including her. She's painting herself as the concerned fiancée who tried to help, but was ultimately rejected. Marcus's jaw tightened. Of course she is. But here's the interesting part, Patricia continued. Constance didn't believe her. She called me specifically because she remembered seeing your mother at a charity gala last year. She remembered how you introduced Dorothy, how proud you were, how you made sure everyone knew she was the reason for your success. And she said anyone trying to claim you'd suddenly turn on your mother didn't understand you at all. Dorothy felt tears spring to her eyes. She barely remembered that gala. Marcus had insisted she come, had introduced her to everyone, had told her story with such pride. She'd felt out of place the entire night, but Marcus had never left her side. Constance asked me point blank what really happened, Patricia said. And I told her. Everything. About the tray, about Vanessa refusing to let your mother rest, about the cruelty, and Marcus. She was horrified. Mrs. Vanderburg, I appreciate you setting the record straight, Marcus said. But you didn't have to do that. I don't want you dragged into this. I'm already in it, Patricia said firmly. I sat and watched that woman torture your mother, and I did nothing. The least I can do now is tell the truth about what I saw. Besides, Constance is already spreading the real story to everyone who'll listen. By tonight, half of Manhattan will know what Vanessa really did. After Patricia hung up, Dorothy looked at Marcus with worry written all over her face. This is going to get ugly, isn't it? Probably, Marcus admitted. But Mom, I need you to understand something. I don't care. Vanessa can tell whatever stories she wants. Her father can make whatever threats he wants. None of it changes what I know to be true. But your business will survive, Marcus interrupted gently. My business is built on solid fundamentals, good relationships, and smart decisions. Not on who I'm engaged to or what social circles I run in. If some people want to pull their investments because I broke up with Vanessa Sterling, then they weren't the kind of partners I wanted anyway. The doorbell rang, and Marcus stood up. That's probably the food. I ordered from that soul food place in Harlem you love. The one with the fried chicken that you said reminds you of your grandmother's? Dorothy felt her throat tighten. He'd remembered. Of course he'd remembered. Marcus had always paid attention to the small things, even when she thought he wasn't listening. But when Marcus opened the door, it wasn't a delivery person. It was Aunt Gloria, Aunt Ruth, and Uncle James, all carrying bags and containers and talking over each other. Baby, we came as soon as we heard, Gloria said, rushing to Dorothy and wrapping her in a careful hug. Patricia Vanderburg called Ruth this morning and told her everything. We've been trying to reach you all morning. My phone's been off, Dorothy admitted. I didn't want to talk to anyone. Well, you're talking to us now, Ruth said firmly. She was the youngest of Dorothy's sisters, barely 60, with fire in her eyes and no patience for nonsense. Where is she? Where's this Vanessa who thinks she can treat my sister like hired help? Gone, Marcus said. I ended the engagement last night. Good, James said. He was Dorothy's older brother, a retired postal worker with hands like ham hocks and a protective streak a mile wide. Because if you hadn't, I was going to have words with that girl. Nobody treats my sister that way. Nobody. Gloria set down her bags and took Dorothy's hands carefully, examining the bandages. Oh, honey, does it hurt bad? It's better than it was, Dorothy said. The doctor came and gave me medicine. A doctor came here? Ruth looked impressed despite herself. Well, that's something. That's how it should be, Marcus said. Mom shouldn't have to take buses to clinics. She shouldn't have to wait in emergency rooms or sit in crowded waiting areas. She's family. She deserves the best care I can provide. Listen to him, Gloria said, smiling through tears. All grown up and taking care of his mama. Dorothy, you raised him right. I tried, Dorothy said softly. The next few hours passed in a blur of family warmth. Gloria and Ruth took over the kitchen, heating up the food they brought and preparing enough to feed an army. James sat with Marcus, talking about business and sports and life, treating him not like a millionaire, but like the nephew he'd known since birth. Dorothy sat at the kitchen table, watching her family move around Marcus's expensive penthouse like they owned it, and felt something settle in her chest. This was what home felt like. Not marble floors and designer furniture, but people who loved you without conditions. Dorothy, you remember when Marcus was 7 and he told his teacher his mama was a superhero? Gloria said, laughing as she stirred a pot of greens. He wrote that whole essay about how you could work 3 jobs and still make it to his school plays. I remember the teacher called me in for a conference, Dorothy said. She was worried I was working too much, that Marcus wasn't being supervised enough. What did you tell her? Ruth asked. I told her that my son was fed, clothed, housed, and loved, Dorothy said, and that sometimes sacrifice looks like absence, but it's still sacrifice. She didn't like that answer much. That teacher was an idiot, James said bluntly. Anyone with eyes could see you were doing everything right. Marcus had been quiet, but now he spoke up. I still have that essay. I kept it all these years. It's in a box in my office at work. Dorothy's eyes widened. You do? Of course I do, Marcus said. It's one of my most important possessions, a reminder of who I am and where I came from. The intercom buzzed, interrupting the moment. Marcus answered it, and James's voice came through sounding nervous. Mr. Washington, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a Mr. Richard Sterling here asking to see you. He says it's urgent. Vanessa's father. Dorothy felt her whole body tense. Tell him I'm busy, Marcus said flatly. I did, sir. He says he'll wait as long as necessary. Marcus looked at Dorothy, a question in his eyes. She wanted to tell him to send Richard away, to avoid the confrontation entirely. But she also knew that would just delay the inevitable. Let him come up, Dorothy said quietly. Let's get this over with. You don't have to be here for this, Marcus said. You can go rest in your room. No, Dorothy said firmly. I'm staying. Whatever he has to say, I want to hear it. Gloria, Ruth, and James immediately moved closer to Dorothy, forming a protective circle around her. Marcus noticed and smiled slightly. Thank you, he said to them, but I can handle this. We know you can, James said, but you're not handling it alone. When Richard Sterling entered the penthouse, he looked exactly like what he was. Old money, old power, and old arrogance. He was in his 70s, silver-haired and impeccably dressed, with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. Marcus, he said, not bothering with pleasantries. We need to discuss this situation with Vanessa. There's nothing to discuss, Marcus said. The engagement is over. Your daughter's belongings are being packed as we speak. That's the end of it. Hardly, Richard said coldly. My daughter is distraught. She's convinced you've had some kind of breakdown, and frankly, from what I'm hearing, she might be right. What you're hearing is lies, Marcus said. Your daughter humiliated my mother. She deliberately caused her physical harm. And when confronted about it, she showed no remorse. That's not a breakdown on my part. That's me finally seeing the truth about who Vanessa really is. Richard's eyes flicked to Dorothy dismissively. This is about her? You're throwing away a future with my daughter because of some misunderstanding with your mother? Don't, Gloria warned, stepping forward. Don't you dare talk about my sister like she's insignificant. Richard looked at Gloria like he was noticing a piece of furniture. Who are you? I'm Dorothy's sister, Gloria said, and you need to watch your tone when you're talking about my family. Your family, Richard repeated with a sneer. Let me tell you about family, madam. Family is about legacy. It's about building something that lasts generations. It's about strategic alliances and maintaining position. It's not about coddling elderly relatives who can't keep up with the demands of modern society. The room went dead silent. Dorothy felt the words like physical blows. But before she could respond, James was on his feet. "You need to leave," James said quietly. "Right now, before I forget my manners."
"Are you threatening me?" Richard asked, seemingly amused.
"I'm telling you the truth," James said. "You're standing in my nephew's home, insulting my sister, talking about family like you know what the word means. But you don't. Because real family doesn't measure worth in social position. Real family doesn't throw people away when they become inconvenient." Richard turned to Marcus. "Is this really the company you want to keep? These people?" "These people are my family," Marcus said, his voice like ice. "And they have more class in their little fingers than your entire social circle combined. Now get out." "We're not finished," Richard said. "My lawyers will be filing suit against you for breach of promise, emotional distress, and defamation of character. We'll tie up your assets for years. We'll make it impossible for you to do business in this city."
"Try it," Marcus said, "and I'll countersue for what your daughter did to my mother. I've got witnesses, medical records, and a very good lawyer who specializes in elder abuse cases. We can both spend years in court, or you can walk away now and save us both the trouble." Richard's face had gone red. "You're making a terrible mistake." "No," Marcus said. "I made a terrible mistake when I proposed to your daughter. Breaking up with her is the first smart decision I've made in months." Richard looked around the room, at Dorothy's family standing united, at Marcus's unwavering expression, and seemed to realize he wasn't going to win this fight. "Fine," he said tightly. "But don't expect any invitations to society events. Don't expect support from our business network. You've made your choice, and you'll live with the consequences." "Gladly," Marcus said. After Richard left, the tension in the room slowly dissolved. Ruth let out a long breath. "That man is poison." "That man is scared," Gloria corrected.
"He's scared because Marcus just proved that money and social position don't buy everything. Can't buy loyalty. Can't buy love. Can't buy the kind of strength that comes from real family." "I need to sit down," Dorothy said suddenly. Her legs were shaking, her hands were throbbing, and the emotional whiplash of the past 24 hours was catching up with her. Marcus was there immediately, helping her to the couch. Too much excitement.
"I should have made him leave sooner."
"No," Dorothy said. "I needed to hear that. Needed to see you stand up to him. Needed to know you meant it when you said you were choosing me." "I always meant it," Marcus said softly. "I just got lost for a while. But I'm back now. I'm here." Over the next week, Dorothy watched as Marcus systematically rebuilt his life without Vanessa in it. He called everyone he knew in business and social circles, telling them directly what had happened before rumors could take hold. Some people were supportive. Some were skeptical. A few investments were pulled. A few partnerships dissolved. But Marcus handled it all with calm determination. Patricia Vanderberg became an unexpected ally, hosting a lunch where she told her story to a room full of influential women. By the end of it, public opinion had shifted dramatically. Vanessa wasn't the wronged fiancée anymore. She was the villain who'd abused an elderly woman. Dorothy's hands healed slowly. The swelling went down, the pain faded, and eventually she could grip things again without wincing. But even after the physical wounds healed, the emotional scars took longer. She'd wake up sometimes in the middle of the night, convinced she was back at that party, holding that tray, begging for permission to rest. Marcus would hear her and come sit with her until the panic passed, just like she used to sit with him when he had nightmares as a child. 3 weeks after the party, Dorothy was in the kitchen making Marcus's favorite breakfast when the phone rang. It was Marcus's lawyer with news. Vanessa's father had dropped all threats of lawsuits. Apparently, Patricia Vanderberg's testimony had made it clear they had no case, and pushing forward would only generate more bad publicity. "It's over," Marcus said when he relayed the news to Dorothy. "Really over. Vanessa's moved to Paris. Her father's pretending the whole thing never happened, and we can move on." "What does moving on look like?" Dorothy asked. Marcus smiled. "It looks like Sunday dinners with the family. It looks like you teaching me how to cook your recipes so I can make them for you when your hands hurt. It looks like us being a team again, the way we always should have been."
"And dating?" Dorothy asked carefully. "You're young, baby. You should find someone."
"I will," Marcus said. "Eventually. But this time I'll be smarter about it. This time I'll know to look for someone who treats my mother with respect. Someone who understands that you're not an embarrassment or a burden. You're a blessing. And anyone who doesn't see that isn't worth my time." Dorothy felt tears start again, but they were good tears this time. Healing tears. "I'm proud of you," she said. "Not because of the money or the success. I'm proud of the man you've become. The man who stood up for what's right, even when it cost him something." "You made me this man," Marcus said simply. "Every value I have, every principle I believe in, came from you. From watching you work yourself to exhaustion for my sake. From seeing you choose kindness, even when people didn't deserve it. From learning that real strength isn't about power or money.
It's about knowing who you are and refusing to compromise on what matters."
He took her hands gently. "So thank you, Mom, for everything you sacrificed, for everything you gave up, for everything you are. I wouldn't change a single thing about my childhood or about you." Dorothy couldn't speak past the lump in her throat, so she just pulled him into a hug. Her son, her baby, her greatest accomplishment. 6 months later, Dorothy stood in the kitchen of Marcus's new penthouse. They'd moved. Patricia Vanderberg had become a regular attendee, bringing her husband Richard, who'd mellowed considerably after his wife had given him an ultimatum about getting involved in family matters. They fit in surprisingly well, adding their own stories to the mix, becoming honorary family members. And Dorothy had started volunteering at a community center in Brooklyn, teaching young mothers how to stretch a dollar, how to make meals from nothing, how to survive and even thrive when the world seemed determined to keep you down. Marcus had funded a program there in her name, and she'd never been prouder. She still had nightmares sometimes about that night at the party, still felt phantom pains in her hands when she was stressed. But she also had something she'd been missing for years. She had her son back. Really back. Not just physically present, but emotionally available, engaged, committed to their relationship. "Mom, the Johnsons are here," Marcus called from the living room. "And they brought their new baby. You want to come meet her?" Dorothy wiped her hands on her apron and headed toward the laughter and noise and love. This was family. This was home. This was everything that mattered. She'd survived poverty, discrimination, exhaustion, and cruelty. She'd survived working herself to the bone and being made to feel worthless for it. She'd survived being told she was an embarrassment, a burden, someone to be pushed aside and forgotten. But she'd done more than survive. She'd raised a son who knew the difference between true worth and false value. A son who understood that kindness mattered more than status, that family meant more than social position, that the measure of a person wasn't in their bank account, but in their character. And in the end, that was the only legacy that mattered. Not penthouse apartments or business empires or social connections, but love. Real, unconditional, unwavering love. Dorothy Washington had given that to her son, and he had given it back tenfold. That was worth more than all the crystal champagne flutes in the world.